5 schools, 5 cities, 2 countries. That's about how much I had to see before even graduating high school. So for me personally, change was never a big thing. It was just something that's a constant and something you just embrace in life. However, when I started entering the workforce, I think early 2000s, I started to hear this word disruption. Disruption, by its very meaning, talks about breaking something, right? And so, if you think about disruption, the first vivid milestone example that I can think of is the launch of the iPhone in 2007, right? It disrupted not just communication, but also computing in a very different way. So if you think about disruption, it used to be something that's associated with industry and milestone events. But as technology has paced, disruption has become a part of everyone's life. I think with the advent of technology and how fast changing the world is, disruption is something that's for all of us today, right? And it's something that's becoming a fast used word across the world. And that's something at Gallup, where we do a lot of research and understand the world through data and analytics, we also started to see that what is it? What's the frequency of disruption happening? So yes, it's becoming a very commonplace thing now. About 8 in 10 people actually report having some kind of big disruptive change in their organizations. And I dare you to go and ask a leader or a manager that when disruption happens, do you get to work with more resources, more time, more budgets, or with less? I dare you because they will laugh, right? It's not. Of course, disruption brings doing more with less. In majority of the leaders and teams that we looked at, disruption actually meant that people were given additional responsibilities. It meant budgets were cut. It meant teams were restructured, right? So what's the word in your mind when you hear the word disruption? What's the emotion that that word brings out? Shout out for me. Tell me. What is the word that comes in your mind or the emotion that comes in your heart when you hear the word disruption? Fear. Anyone from the side? Anxiety? Did I hear that? That's right. It is a lot of fear, anxiety, and all of these emotions. And that's actually how people feel too in organizations. Because when disruption happens, people start to feel more disconnected with everything that's going on. There is a fear of what's my tomorrow. And there's also less of an understanding of why am I doing more with less suddenly. So there's more burnout. There's less connection to the culture. And well, logically, there's more chances of me finding a new place where perhaps this is not happening. So that's the reality of what happens in this commonly occurring thing called disruption. So we at Gallup started to study what can leaders do to actually combat or really lead teams better during disruption. And we did this massive study across the world, so about 76% of the world's population, 52 countries. And in fact, we started this research about 2 decades ago and republished it with a representation of the world recently. But what we were really looking to understand is that a lot of leadership studies study the leader. They study what the leadership patterns are. We flipped the switch. We said, let's study the followers. Let's understand what do people need from their leaders in times of change. And so we did this massive study. And I'm going to share the findings from that study today, which will be very interesting for you to go back and apply no matter which sphere of life you're in, but also very interesting for us to think about from a workplace point of view. And why am I talking about these things in a workplace setting? One, because on an average, we spend about 90,000 hours of our life working as an adult. So the only thing we do more than work is sleeping, and I guarantee you none of us get enough of that. And the second thing, we studied and found that one of the single most important things to living a good life in the world today is a good job. So that can make or break your life. So of course we want to understand how these needs show up in the workplace setting. Well, we asked two very simple questions in this study. We said, name a leader or a person that actually influenced you or created a positive impact in your life, and then describe that impact. That's it. So here's what we found, and that's the third reason why I'm going to talk about it in a workplace setting. We actually found that these were the type of leaders people named had a positive influence. Of course, people you know and your immediate family being that top rung, but for working adults, the biggest other group is their organizational contacts, whether leaders, managers, or you think about team members. So that's who are impacting them in a positive way. So there's a huge role that organizations and leaders play in the life of people. So what were these needs? When we asked people to describe them, we found 4 key needs that are most prevalent. Those 4 needs are hope, trust, compassion, and stability. Now, I'm going to ask you to take a guess. Out of these 4, which one did you think showed up as the number 1 need? All 4 very important. Which one do you think is number 1? Shout out for me. Trust. What do you guys think? You trust them with the answer? Okay. So, well, actually, whenever I ask this question, the answer is always trust. Sometimes it's stability. But the answer is actually hope. So across the world, across different regions, the biggest need for people today is hope. And that's what they need from their leaders. The second biggest is trust, followed by compassion, and then stability. And if you look at our region of Asia Pacific, or close to home in Thailand, where we are today, it's even higher. So 62% of the people in Thailand actually cited hope as the primary need. So what does this tell us, right, in terms of the 4 needs? When you think about hope, hope is defined by Dr. Shane Lopez as really seeing something good in the future, but also having the influence or the ability to get there, right? And Dr. Don Clifton actually put it beautifully when he said, we are most hopeful when we get to do what we do best. When you get to be your best version, when you get to thrive, that's when you feel hopeful. So in a team, in an organization, how can you create hope? Know what gets people going. What are their strengths? How do you get them to be the best version of who they are? Get them those opportunities where they can thrive and put them in roles where they can succeed, right? Give them that hope. What does trust mean in an organizational setting or in a team? Well, trust is interesting. It's a bit like air, right? You don't feel the presence of it, but you definitely notice the absence. And in fact, we found from our research that teams that talk about trust the most are the ones that have it the least, right? So trust really matters in the form, the way it shows up is that psychological safety. That fear of not having, the lack of fear of really speaking up, and really knowing why we are doing what we are doing. In times of disruption, what's our purpose? Why are we doing all these things? Do I trust my leader that it's going somewhere? And that's really important. And so if we think about the psychological safety and the impact and presence of trust, In times of change, it can really soften the impact of change. It almost creates that cushion for leaders. If I have trust around me, people know why they are doing what they are doing, even if everything feels shaky today, and they're less likely to feel burnt out, and they're more likely to be engaged even during change. So trust is valuable, right? The third one is very interesting, compassion. Compassion is often considered as a good to have, right? We must be compassionate. A lot of leaders that are very hard leaders, they feel compassion is something that softens them. But in fact, compassion is really important to run a good business. We actually found data that when people experience care every day in their workplace, they actually perform better. So it's not just a good to have, it's something that's important, something we need to care about. We need to care about caring about people, right? So compassion is really important. And the final one that I want to talk about is stability. Think about being in a turbulent flight, if you've ever been in one. I don't wish for you to be in one. I've been in a few myself. But when you're in a turbulent flight, who do you look at? A lot of people actually look at the stewardess, right? The steward or the stewardesses. And we look at them and we hope, what's their expression like? Are they rushing to their seat? Have they stopped serving drinks? And that actually tells us that what's the real state. So just like those air hostess or stewardess in the plane, managers are that pillar of stability for us in the organization. So when you think about stability, a lot of it comes from that immediate manager or supervisor. In fact, 70% of your experience in an organization comes from an immediate manager or supervisor. People join great organizations and they leave bad managers, right? So stability, a lot of it comes from how your manager is going to convey it. So think about that. And as you think about these needs in terms of how they manifest, think about examples around us, right? An immediate one, a top of mind, something that's, no conference is complete without it, is AI, right? So think about, what about these needs in the AI context? How do we create hope with AI? Think about how to apply AI to help people do more what they like to do, what they do well, amplify their strengths. Think about stability through the managers. Think about compassion by helping people reskill. Think about establishing those guidelines for people to really build trust. So it applies in any change that's around us. It also is very important for us to think about this because this impacts lives. We studied in terms of these needs, and when they are met, how do people feel about their lives? So we study this thing called happiness, of course, which is based on a scale which is thriving, struggling, suffering. More on that in the happiness report if you're interested. But we found that this thing called suffering actually gets impacted when you look at hope. So hope is not just the top need, but the absence or presence of hope actually is game-changing even in the way people perceive their life. And starting with hope, as you continue to layer the other needs, if you build trust, if you build stability, if you build compassion, people are more likely to have better lives. They are less likely to be suffering. So with so much change happening around us, think about this. The needs of followers are not just important to deliver, to get people going, but it's important to also get them to have a better life overall. And the final thing I want to leave you with is that if you're thinking about, hey, but in all of this change, keep your emotions aside, it's not possible. As human beings, we have studied that 70% of our decisions are based on emotional factors. So we are emotional creatures. So let's embrace it today and think of these needs, and in the times of change, really embrace trust, compassion, stability, and hope, and remember to embrace these emotions as we go along. Thank you so much.